Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Thank you for joining the Senate Finance Committee. Today is Thursday, February 13th. We're going to hear 10 bills today, and I'll read the order. Sponsors, you have as much time as you need to explain your bill. Witnesses, you have 2 minutes. Please honor that 2 minutes. Thank you very much. We're going to start with Senator Kagan, Senate Bill 365. And you can bring up your panel, which is Richard Reinhardt and Henry Bogdan. And then Senate Bill 560. 522, 523, 496, 302, 578, 377, 664, and 665. Now, I read all those, but they're subject to change because, as you can see, some of our senators aren't here because they're in other committees testifying on their bills. So you'll see people come and go. It isn't that they aren't interested in your bill. It's like because they have bills in other committees. So thank you very much. And Senator Kagan, you may start.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. For colleagues, for the record, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. I am often very honored to be described as the senator for the nonprofit sector. And too often, these hardworking organizations that are in every nook and cranny of our state, they are nonpartisan, they are large and small, and they work without enough compensation, enough respect, and enough support from government. If all of the homeless shelters, food pantries, battered women's shelters, and literacy councils close their doors, first, our neighbors in need would be worse off, and second off, our government would likely need to step in, which would increase our costs, increase our taxes, and provide less effective services. So there are many ways that our government supports the small businesses in our district. And there are, we have ombudsmen that help make sure that things go smoothly for those in long-term care or for our small minority and women-owned businesses. They are advocates, they are liaisons, and they help sort of unclog a stuck place in government. This bill, Senate Bill 365, important for every single day of the year, would simply add one person to our entire state government that would be a nonprofit navigator. So for the 40,000 plus nonprofits in the state of Maryland, they often are need some guidance. Am I eligible for this grant opportunity? I haven't gotten my money yet. Who should I call? I can't get a response from this agency or department. So I've been working with the Department of Commerce, and they agree that there can be one place, one person that can provide the support and assistance for all of our nonprofits around the state. So I realize that we are in tight fiscal times, Madam Chair. Two things. First off, we kept this really small, again, one person, so think one human being with a computer and a phone. And the fiscal note is less than $100,000, which is a little bit the magic number, and even in out years, it's still under $100,000. But even if it were more, and it's not, the reality is that in tight times, there is greater pressure and more of a burden on our nonprofit sector. And they need our support, our guidance, and we need to help them. And this position could help provide that support. You may have been paying attention to the funding freeze in grants and contracts that have come through the new Trump administration. That affects our nonprofits. There's a trickle down in challenges, and we need to make sure that we are there to bolster them so they can continue to serve. So there is a lot of interest and a lot of support for this bill. We really tried to respect the committee's time, so I only have 2 witnesses. There is more testimony in your folder, and anyone in your district, any nonprofit in your district can tell you how valuable this position would be. I suspect that there is much to say, but I'm hoping that I have made the case that this one position will be an enormous asset. And I'd like to think of it as a GPS for our nonprofit sector to help navigate and guide through state government. And with that, Madam Chair, if it's okay, I'd like to toss it to Henry Bogdan, my wonderful partner at Maryland Nonprofits.
Thank you, Senator Kagan. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Henry Bogdan. I'm the Policy Director of Maryland Nonprofits. We are the statewide association for nonprofit organizations. We have 1,500 member organizations. The Senator covered pretty much most of the ground. I mean, we know this is a problem because we get calls, and I'd be surprised if your offices don't get calls from time to time. It really would be a more efficient line of communication to have a point of contact that agencies can go to. And as the Senator said, these are not normal times. This was a good idea last year. This year it's a better idea because just things are very uncertain, and organizations need to be able to reach out into the right agency, find the right person without wasting a lot of their time. A lot of these organizations really rely on the executive director who's managing the operations to make these kind of contacts. So we appreciate your support and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Always a pleasure seeing you again. Members of the committee, for the, you know what, I don't know if I can get it that far. Oh, here.
Okay.
Is that better?
Here.
Can you hear me better?
Here.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. I got 2 mics. I feel so greedy. Again, for the record, Richard Reinhardt with Percy Public Affairs. We are just delighted to be sitting next to the Vice Chair of E3 on this bill for a variety of reasons. We strongly support this bill. Over the last 7 years, I've had the pleasure of representing various nonprofit organizations across the state, including national organizations like the National Cryptologic Foundation, to the YMCA, to regional organizations like the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad in Allegheny County. Each of them provides their own unique mission and significant contributions to Maryland's economy, their workforce, education, historical preservation, and tourism. Their impacts to their surrounding communities and to the region are well documented and acknowledged. And while many of them are vastly different, they share a common need. That universal is the need for financial support, whether it be through private or public funding. Nonprofit organizations similar to the ones I just mentioned have been fortunate enough to have ongoing support from the state. But as rising operational and capital expenses persist, the demand on these organizations to seek new and alternative appropriations becomes growing and more intimidating, and it's a challenge, especially for those groups that solely rely on part-time staff or volunteers. This leads me to why we're here supporting this bill. This bill will provide a conduit for those individual organizations to have a point of contact within the state to help with those challenges. Even with folks that are grateful and have the additional resources to either have someone in their designated offices as an executive director or a lobbyist to handle this, it's still a challenge for all of us. So we see this to be a great benefit to our nonprofit organizations, and we would strongly support this bill, and we urge this committee to pass it this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I see a question from Senator Guile.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator, for this bill. Richard, I know you talked a little bit about some of the nonprofits that you represent. Could you tell us a little bit more about, how this navigator, how this would benefit your clients, your nonprofit clients?
Sure. Always a pleasure talking with my senator from Severna Park. Yes. So as I mentioned, and it's actually part of the bill file, the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad, they submitted some supportive language, but I think there's a great story that comes out of that. And I think if we had this bill a couple of years ago, it would have been even deeply more impactful for them. I've been representing them for several years, and if you all remember during COVID, during the lockdowns, a lot of these nonprofits were hurting. They were desperate for keeping the mortgages going, the bank, payroll for their volunteers or for their staff. And we saw a lot of money coming through the feds and pass-throughs in certain nonprofit grants through the state. One in particular was, I think, called the SERI grant or the NORI grant for nonprofits. Had it not been for the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad having my representation, they wouldn't have been able to survive. Had it not been for the contacts that I have garnered over the years working with legislators and the administration, they wouldn't have known that those programs would even be in existence, let alone if they were even eligible. So I think seeing that a organization that depends on the support not only from the state and also the federal support and what we provide, having that additional support with Inside as a navigator also helps us do our job better and also help those organizations know what they're eligible for so that they can survive. And I'm happy to report that at the time 4 years ago when they literally went belly up after having 35 years established as one of the biggest tourisms in Allegheny County, had it not been for the $500,000 they received, they would have been gone. And that would have been a detriment to the economic area of Allegheny County. So the need for obviously having nonprofit support in the form of a nonprofit navigator is critical.
Yeah, yeah. I think we see this across so many sectors where there's so many great programs that we have, but a lot of people just not knowing, or organizations, but small businesses with nonprofits just don't know where to start.
Correct.
So I appreciate that. And Senator, did you have anything to
Thank you
add?
so much, Senator Guile. Two things. First off, we do have the equivalent of a small business navigator that already exists, and I'm not sure I was clear enough about that. In the Department of Commerce, which is why we chose to put this in the Department of Commerce, because it's very similar. So the liaison, if there's a problem that a small business person is having, there is a point person, an employee within the Department of Commerce. So we're just looking for parity to make sure that the nonprofits in our state, the second largest employer, 13% of our workforce, 14% of our economy, and that they have one person that they can contact. And Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, I neglected to mention that we do have a proposed amendment for your consideration. When we drafted this bill, and I was working with former Commerce Secretary Anderson on this all through the interim, we had a number of conversations about it. The plan was to have the bill go into effect July 1st, but give them 6 months to hire the right person and, frankly, save half a salary. And so that we would make sure that we were super affordable and the new person would start January 1 of 26. That is now, in my suggestion, a luxury we can no longer afford. And again, looking at the fiscal note, even a full year's salary is in the out years, 86,900, 90,800, 94,900, 98,900. It stays under $100,000 in out years. And so we have an amendment for your consideration that we've already requested that would make this an emergency bill. We hope it would get moved quickly and signed by the governor quickly, and then the Commerce Department would bring in this nonprofit navigator to begin to start work not later than July 1st. So not later than the very beginning of the fiscal year. But if they've got someone within that they want to pivot or have launched this, nonprofits are freaking out. And the best examples I can offer is that Henry Bogdan and Maryland nonprofits have had multiple Zooms trying to explain some of the new policies coming down from the federal level. And they had, they thought it was going to be 200 people or something, and then 800 nonprofits wanted to try to jam into the Zoom room and stuff. There is just a crisis reaction right now. And I think Maryland should step up, and again, with one person in the Department of Commerce to help them navigate. So thank you, Senator Guile.
Senator Reedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you calling me about this bill earlier and talking it through. How will people find out who this navigator is? Because I frankly don't know that I knew there was a small business navigator.
That's a really important question. I think Commerce would help put it out. They could feature it on their website. Maryland nonprofits would certainly put it in their newsletter and in their blasts and their legislative agenda. And I think representatives like Richard Reinhardt here and others would help put the word out. Each of us would make sure that our constituents are aware of it so that when people do call us, nonprofit leaders in our district call us and say, we haven't gotten our payment yet for the work we did last year, they can say, you know what, I'm not the expert here, but this nonprofit navigator can help you unstick it. I can also say that the comptroller has done a great job at trying to implement our prompt payment parity, but we still are hearing of delays and problems, and these nonprofit leaders still have to pay rent, still have to make payroll, and the delays are problematic. So this navigator is going to be able to unstick and get them paid.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Seeing no other questions, thank you for this bill. This ends the hearing on Senate Bill 365.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now, next we have Senate Bill 560, Maryland Commission on Health Equity, Membership and Purposes, and we have Senator Mary Washington. Thank you. There she is. Thank you, Senator.
Hello, colleagues. Thought I'd make amends, and you'll just hear from me today on this bill, so don't worry. But again, I appreciate your attention as always. Good afternoon, Chair Beidel, well, it's Vice Chair Hayes and colleagues. For the record, Senator Mary Washington, and I'm here to present Senate Bill 560. My connection and the significance of the healthcare profession runs really deep with me, and healthcare more broadly. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a respiratory therapist. They met in Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. My mom tells the story that she saw him and said, "Oh, look what the good Lord sent me," and promptly set about coming up with reasons to meet him. 6 months later, they became married. They were married, and 11 months later, I was born in Mercy Douglas Hospital. So, to be clear, the importance of hospitals and the hospital system for many of us is really vital. In fact, that's where my parents met. So this isn't at all about hating hospitals or undervaluing the important role that hospitals play in our healthcare delivery system, but also in the health of our public. What this bill does and what this bill is about is restoring really critical elements of what the Maryland Commission on Health Equity was originally established to do when it was passed in 2021 as the Shirley Nathan Pulliam Equity Act. And specifically, I want to restore some key commission members. There were some commission members removed, and it reaffirms two essential charges of the commission. One, to employ a health equity framework to examine access to transportation, and then also accessing proximity to healthcare facilities and providers as key social determinants of health. So here's the story, and this is why I'm here. The commission was formed based on the work of the Social Determinants of Health Task Force that was created in 2018, and it was led by the University of Maryland, Baltimore. The task force set to look at and try to better understand the social and demographic factors that drive the health disparities that we hear about a lot and that we think about a lot. And that commission set about and did that work, and it was led by our former colleague, Shirley Nathan Pulliam, and that's why the act to transform this task force into an actual commission had her name. So when the commission was formed, it was envisioned as an independent, cross-section advisory body, one that would break down the silos in government, that it would analyze systemic barriers to health equity, recommend solutions grounded in real-world data and the needs of our community. So our legislative intent was clear when we passed that bill in 2021. Additionally, it was to advise the state on the health disparities across the various demographic groups and to develop a comprehensive health equity plan that addressed the racial disparities, but also looked at behavior practices, of course, but also really look at those more systemic things, such as housing, transportation, economic stability, environmental conditions. A lot of things that we've been talking about for many years, but really didn't have a place to bring together all the partners for it. So the goals were there. So what went wrong? In full transparency, the Hogan administration stood up the commission. I was appointed to represent the Senate. However, with the pressing demands of COVID-19 and the pandemic and other things, the commission met infrequently and wasn't really a priority when there was a transition to the Moore administration. So in late 2022, I met with the now former Secretary of Health to discuss the commission, only to find that it was not on her radar. So I worked with the appointments secretary to revitalize the commission, to get the appointments made, and that the new Deputy Secretary of Public Health Services was appointed to be at the helm. And to achieve its goals, the commission had two committees, a data advisory committee that was responsible for making recommendations on data collection, reporting, evaluation, and visualization, and also a health equity policy committee that was established to develop and employ a health equity frame for reducing the disparities and the cost of these disparities in Maryland. So in their 2023 report, there was a lot of work that had been done. The commission was energized. I can attest to that. I was there. We were ready to fulfill our mission. We pledged to begin to survey all the different departments on equity-related initiatives and to really consider how we could adopt the health equity framework based on the work. So imagine my surprise when I learned, when I went to my May commission meeting last year, that the commission had been hijacked for another purpose. HB 133, that was passed in 2024, turned the MCHE into a governance structure for the CMS states advancing all-payer health equity approaches and development, AKA the AHEAD model. The commission's purpose was fundamentally changed. I also might say, without any discussion with the members or anything. Now, this AHEAD model, as I'm sure if you all haven't already had testimony or heard about it, but that model is designed to improve healthcare equity, healthcare quality and equity by lowering the cost of healthcare pay for healthcare payers, including Medicaid, Medicaid, and private insurers. So under HB 133, the commission was now required to develop and monitor the state health equity plan that was focused solely on the AHEAD model. The Data Advisory Committee was redirected to make recommendations specifically on the SHEP. You may hear the argument that the Commission on Health Equity was best positioned to lead the AHEAD model statewide plan. However, this misses a crucial distinction. The AHEAD model is a narrow framework, and it's focused on healthcare financing. The commission's mission was much larger than that. Now, while the AHEAD model plays a role, its narrow focus reduced all of the work to look at health equity broadly to just looking at health systems. It limited the ability to address critical social determinants like housing, transportation, environmental conditions, which we know are some of the real drivers for inequities in health, but also the costs, the real drivers of costs. It also reduced the representation of key agencies. There were a number of agencies that were simply that were included as a part of the original bill, like the Department of the Environment, of Transportation, of Corrections, Education. And this weakened the opportunity for partnerships to get out of these silos. And also, it stripped the critical determinants. The framework was stripped of essential elements to look at workplace equity, access, mobility, social justice. So now you know the problem, and this is just a first step. SB 560 restores the commission to also engage in its original purpose and ensure it remains a leader in addressing health disparities and inequities. It restores the broader focus, not making the AHEAD model the only and primary responsibility. Understand the state has signed a contract, not looking to disrupt that. But we do, at the same time, need to also look at the issues that were that it was originally intended to do. So in addressing the department's concerns, and you have a letter from them, which suggests that this mandates an extensive new study. That's not the case. It is just simply replacing, transportation was struck from the original list. It's just putting that list back there. The environment was struck from the original list. It's simply putting it back there. It's just putting some key organizations back into the list. Also, it adds a couple new ones, in the areas to address kind of our senior health. So, in conclusion, the Shirley Nathan Pulliam Act was never intended to create another bureaucratic mechanism for checking a box to satisfy a federal requirement. The Shirley Nathan Pulliam and others worked too hard to build this commission so that it could be used to reduce so they could be used as a powerful force for addressing the systemic and structural factors that cause some Marylanders to experience significantly worse healthcare outcomes than others. SB 560 takes a small step. Again, not looking to disrupt the entire apple cart here, in restoring the legislative intent of the original commission and to ensure that we remain and that equity and that the structural and systemic causes of healthcare inequities is addressed at a full spectrum. What we're talking about are preventable illnesses. We're talking about reducing premature deaths. We're talking about lower overall quality of life for affected populations. So thank you so much for your time and attention, colleagues. I respectfully request a favorable report on SB 560.
Thank you very much, Senator. Do you have a question, Senator?
Order. Thank you, Senator, for your testimony today. When I first saw the bill, I just didn't know where you were going with it, and so some of the background was really helpful.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the senator's aware, but I know the speaker has a pretty large initiative to look at equity across the state, and even standing up an agency that would have a secretary in that regard. I guess as we deliberate on this, it would be helpful if you haven't already had a chance to take a look at that and help inform us how the two might intersect.
What I can tell you now is that whoever's the head.
Not really. You don't have to, unless you want to. Of
It's
course,
easy.
you will.
Just like the head, some of the other cabinet positions, they would be a part of this statewide initiative because, again, it's about developing a full, comprehensive statewide plan on a number of different sectors. Like commerce was originally in there. There's a lot of different things. So that whoever leads that department would be a part of this commission.
Senator Langen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. There's obviously been a lot going on with this Commission on Health Equity, and it sounds as though, kind of to encapsulate what you're saying, is that created with an original intention and a charge and a mission, because of a head, it seemed like its mission and also its some of the members were jettisoned. The mission was kind of broadened or co-opted, depending on how you look at it. So the commission's been a little bit hijacked in a way by obviously a big, the head model that is really, really important and the state has to move forward with, but taking the commission in a different turn, I guess. It seems like your take on it is that the commission is still salvageable, which is why you're just trying to add some of these folks back into the commission. And is it your feeling, and I presume you're still on the commission now, that it can carry on with these multiple roles, even though, the head model is probably going to suck up a lot of air in the room with the bandwidth that the commission has. Mm-hmm. But you think that there's still ability to, with some of these additions in here and the modification of the charge to also include things like transportation and those kinds of items would still be manageable under this commission then?
Right, yeah. So a couple of things there. Yes, I'd like to salvage it because people spent a lot
versus
of time.
Like starting a new commission.
No. If a new commission gets started, it should be a head. Frankly, just in my humble opinion, all of the people who have been added towards the end, the insurance, the health services cost review commission, all of these were added, and they have a very different function. So those could be their own commission. And I think that probably could have been the model. Those of us who are on it, that's not what I came to do. There were a lot of questions during the first few meetings. People were not expecting to be a part of it, a part of this. Again, why I perhaps would hope that maybe it could transition, and there's a new secretary. I haven't had an opportunity to talk with the new secretary. Perhaps there could be a way to, sort of put this, I think, where it belongs, and I think that's a very different type of charge. So.
Just remind me, were you the sponsor of the original bill that
Yes,
created this?
I was the sponsor of the original.
Did they consult with you last year in this
No,
hijacking?
and it's interesting that the bill was heard in the House like in March 6th, I think, and it was passed late. It got here to the Senate March 26th or something like that. You heard it, and then we passed it, and a couple days later, it passed the floor. So it was completely, no one knew.
So you were the original
about
bill
it.
sponsor
Yeah.
creating this commission.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, last year, a lot of transitions and changes was done very quickly, I guess to probably account for the fact that AHEAD was moving forward very quickly, being signed very quickly, as it was last year.
Right.
But it certainly changed a lot of the tenure and the charge and the mission of the
Right, but
commission.
just for the committee to speak on, keep it doesn't change the need for the
Right.
state to develop a plan outside of just fulfilling the financing. This is a very narrow way of looking at healthcare, and this commission and the members and this interdisciplinary approach was finally, I think, ready to recognize that there are all different ways that we can, as a state, lead in improving public health as well as reducing costs, and to turn it into this very narrow, it misses an opportunity to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it changes the focus of the commission to be very laser focused on healthcare financing, which is obviously really important, and we have a lot going on with AHEAD, but it misses the broader picture of health equity, which extends beyond just kind of healthcare financing and what you're doing with this bill, hopefully in bringing in additional members and stakeholders and covering things like transportation, other social determinants of health, creates a broader focus that would also help support the AHEAD goals that the state is trying to push forward with also. So.
And Madam Chair, really, a version of this bill in my head was a lot more, could have been a lot more, dramatic, but I really wanted mostly to bring this to the attention to the committee and to all of those that were invested in addressing healthcare equity and understanding that it has to do with proximity to a hospital, not just how much you charge. It has to do with what do our transportation systems look like? What are the distribution of professionals, in our rural and urban areas? These are all things that, again, if you look at our annual reports from 22 and 23, and even the beginning of 24, had already done a lot of work to start to do. To move forward and develop some ideas, and then it just was all cut off. And I think that we shouldn't allow that to happen.
Okay, thank you.
I see no other questions. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 560.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator. And Senator Charles, we have two of your bills. The first one is Senate Bill 522. And I see that our comptroller's here, and right after Senator Charles's two bills. Thank you, comptroller.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Senator Washington. Thank you, Chair Biondo and Vice Chair Hayes and honorable members of the Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Senator Nick Charles, and I am testifying in support of Senate Bill 522, which requires home builders to provide written warranty information for all appliances, including heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems registered by the builder in the contract for the initial sale of a home. This bill seeks to create transparency from home buyers and strengthen consumer protection in the housing market. Purchasing a house is one of, if not the most significant investments a person can make. It is imperative that buyers have access to all of the information about the products and systems in their new home. By mandating that the builders provide warranty details for the appliances, Senate Bill 522 enables home buyers to make much more informed decisions about their purchases and ensures that if they buy a home with an HVAC system that has a warranty of 5 years, they are not taking on that system with only 2 years left under the warranty, having absolutely no clue that the appliance was registered 3 years in advance. In Maryland, home builders have due responsibility to ensure the quality and durability of the homes they construct. However, many buyers are still unaware of the specific warranties associated with the appliances until after problems occur. Senate Bill 522 solves this issue by taking a proactive approach to confront this issue by making the warranty information an explicit part of the home buying contract, thus eliminating potential confusion and frustration. The bill creates a clear framework for both builders and buyers, facilitating a more positive and accountable process. If a builder does not register appliances before sale, they will not be affected by this bill. It is very simply just ensuring notification if and only if the builder registers an appliance before the sale. This process builds trust and allows homeowners to more easily access the warranty services they are entitled to. I urge you to consider the long-term benefits of this legislation, not just for consumers, but for the integrity of the home building industry in Maryland. Senate Bill 522 is a practical measure that aligns with the values of transparency, accountability, and consumer protection. I urge a favorable report on this much-needed piece of legislation.
Thank you, Senator Charles. We have a question from the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This sounds like a great bill, Senator Charles. I couldn't figure out for the life of me why Maryland Catholic Charities submitted testimony favorable with amendment, and then I realized it was for House Bill 522.
Yes.
That's in our bill file. It has nothing to do with your bill, so.
Yes.
Good bill.
I pulled that out earlier today.
Guys, thank you so very much. Thank you, madam.
Thank you for that. I was wondering about that too, but I didn't read it. I don't see any other questions. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 522. And Senator Charles, if you'll continue with Senate Bill 523, State Employees Cancer Screening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Nick Charles, and I am testifying in support of Senate Bill 523, which will provide state employees with up to 4 hours of paid leave annually for cancer screenings. Early detection is one of, if not the most effective ways to improve cancer survival rates. Yet many individuals delay or feel forced to forego screenings due to concerns of missing work or financial strain. Each year, more than 31,000 Marylanders are diagnosed with invasive cancer, and over 10,000 succumb to the disease. Early detection through regular screening is imperative, as it significantly increases the chances of proper treatment and survival. In research published in the New England Journal of Medicine, it was found that in areas with mandated paid sick leave, cancer screenings increased in approximately 6% to 8%, a significant increase when fully considered. Senate Bill 523 assists the statistic by ensuring that state employees, including temporary and part-time workers, have access to necessary preventative care without sacrificing their income or job security. As the rulemakers of Maryland, we have a responsibility to prioritize the health and the well-being of our workforce. Providing this leave is a proactive and a cost-effective approach to addressing public health that not only benefits employees in the short term, but also reduces long-term health care costs associated with late-stage cancer diagnosis. Similar policies have been successfully implemented in other states, such as New York, Illinois, and Minnesota. Senate Bill 523 ensures that the benefits provided by this bill are administered equitably by covering all branches of state government and requiring the Secretary to establish clear procedures for requesting and approving leave. This structure ensures efficiency while maintaining accountability in the program's implementation. By passing Senate Bill 523, Maryland can build upon a set precedent for workplace wellness and demonstrate its commitment to the health of its public servants and constituents. I firmly urge a favorable report on this progressive piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I don't see any questions for this good piece of legislation. Thank you for bringing it.
Thank you.
That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 523. Madam Comptroller, would you like to come up and do Senate Bill 664? Unless you'd rather just hide in the back for a while longer. Senate Bill 664 is business regulation, miscellaneous state business licenses, enforcement and penalties. And our comptroller has with her Matt, I can never say your last name, Dudzik?
Dudzik, you got it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. It's great to be here with you today. For the record, I'm Comptroller Brooke Learman, and I'm here to ask for a favorable report for Senate Bill 664. So one of the lesser-known responsibilities of my office is to enforce business license requirements found in the Business Regulations article. There are a few business license types covered here, the most common of which is the trader's license. Basically, what this means is that our Field Enforcement Bureau, FEB, is tasked with going into businesses like gas stations or convenience stores that have trader's licenses to make sure their trader's licenses are up to date. Retailers and wholesalers who buy and sell goods need a trader's license, just as an FYI. Wholesalers and growers don't. So the Business Regulations article requires businesses to have a license to sell goods because it gives them the legal authority to operate and helps ensure the business remains compliant with state law, including their obligation to pay state sales and use taxes. So if we want to have funds for schools and roads and whatnot, we have to collect this revenue, and we use these licenses as one way to incentivize businesses to pay the taxes owed to the state. So if a business operates in violation of state law or fails to pay taxes, they don't get a license. So over the past 2 years, I've learned a lot about our agency, the good, the bad, the ugly. The good part of this division is that our field enforcement officers make every effort to avoid issuing citations unless it's absolutely necessary. They make repeated visits to businesses and work to educate those businesses about their legal obligations and help get them into compliance. But one of the ugly things that I have learned is that under the law, when an agent goes into a store and there's no business license and they haven't complied, our agent can issue a citation to any person working at that store. Any person. And it's not just any old civil citation, this is a criminal citation. In other words, the 18-year-old kid who has a summer job as the manager of a local convenience store and has no authority over whether that store has their business license or not can be criminally cited for that store not keeping their license up, even though that kid had nothing to do with and probably doesn't even know that the store does not have a license. I think this is terrible. First, it means we could be issuing a criminal citation to someone who isn't responsible. That person then needs to go to court to fight it or pay a fine or risk jail time. And second, the goal of the enforcement system is to curb unlicensed activity. But it doesn't help to issue citations to workers in the business who have nothing to do with obtaining and retaining the business license. So I'm asking you to do something today that elected officials rarely ask you to do. I am asking you to give me less authority. I would like you to fix this in state law so that my agency can only issue citations to people, to a person or to the people that a business has designated as the person responsible for getting a license, not just any old person who happens to work in that store. And that is what SB 664 does. Rather than using broad language as it is now in state law that says any agent is individually subject to penalties, we are proposing a narrow list of the parties who may be cited in those cases, parties who actually have some authority over whether that business has a license or not. We are asking them to designate a licensed representative. Each business can choose whoever they want to be the licensed representative, but we just need to know who that person is. It could be their resident agent, for instance. A lot of businesses have resident agents. So that way, my office knows who has responsibility and can focus its enforcement on where it will actually make a difference while protecting Marylanders. I also want to add that we've been in discussion with the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, the Maryland Retailers Association Alliance, and other groups who have some questions about how the language is written. This is a very confusingly written bill. When you read like the fiscal note summary, for instance, it looks like we're trying to add authority, but we already have the authority to cite people. We are trying to restrict the authority that we have. We agree with the chamber and the retailers that some of how it's drafted is not correct, or we want to amend. And we're happy to make sure that this bill only applies to businesses with a brick and mortar location in the state of Maryland, because those are the only ones that our agents are actually going to cite. We're happy to continue working with the chamber and other stakeholders, and we will also be offering some sponsor amendments to make sure that you have that. So thank you, and I urge a favorable report of SB 664. I'm happy to take
Matthew,
any
you're going to
questions.
speak?
Thank you. For the record, Matt Dudzik, Director of State Affairs for the Office of the Comptroller. Just here to answer any questions, but wonderful to be here.
Thank you. So I have a question.
Yes.
I'm seeing emails in opposition dated today.
Okay.
So if you're working with
Who are they from?
Howard County,
Oh,
ABC contractors,
ABC, we have
ABC
spoken
builders.
with Sean,
so
their lobbyist.
I think you have some work to do.
Okay, yeah, we're happy to keep, I mean, we talked with ABC last week, and they told us they were okay.
Sit down.
So we're happy to go back to them and make sure. And we are in conversations with the Chamber of Commerce and the retailers. We talked just yesterday with them again.
Yeah, I see the retailers on here.
Yep.
Maryland Chamber, Howard County Chamber. Okay, we'll wait to hear
I
back.
think the Maryland Chamber in the House yesterday was favorable with amendments, so I'm not sure.
Okay, you're right.
Yep.
We're favorable with amendment. Okay, so thank you. Continue to work.
Sure.
I'm going to start at Senator Washington and come down that row with questions.
Oh, well, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Quick question. So, how would this bill, if you're removing the enforcement from one division to the next or one department to the next, how does this work for agencies, within, I have 7 municipalities in my district, 27 in Prince George's County. We get a lot of complaints about the small businesses that don't pay their taxes to their local municipality, but they still have a business license. How would this bill help them in that situation?
Sure. So we're not actually moving this from division to division.
Okay.
It will stay with our Field Enforcement Bureau. We already have the authority to cite businesses that don't have a business license. Often we go to businesses or we figure this out because they haven't paid their taxes. And then we go in and we say, hey, your business license is expired. You need to pay your taxes and you need to get your business license. What this will do, we will still do that enforcement work. But when we go in and we cite somebody, we won't be saying, hey, you're the cashier and you're an agent of this business. We're going to give you the criminal citation, even though you don't have the ability to get the business license.
Right.
That's what it will change. We will actually be citing the representative of the business who could get the license and who is responsible.
I like it. Thank you.
Yep.
Senator Guile.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize, Madam Comptroller. It's like Christmas lights right now twinkling. It's good to see you. I guess I'm trying to understand, so if there's an unlicensed, it almost seems to me like a what comes first, the chicken or the egg type of situation. Like if you have to designate what's sort of like a resident agent, but designate a licensed representative. But what happens if they never got a license to begin with and they're operating a business without, is it just the owner then that you're citing or you're with the criminal citation? Or
So
what if they're
Matt can correct me if I'm wrong. So,
Okay.
but generally what happens is that businesses get a license to do business in the state and they are then paying their sales and use tax. Often then they let it expire, they don't renew it, or they don't pay their taxes, and then we need to revoke it because they haven't paid their taxes. But in general, we issued about 1,200 criminal citations last year. And so we are, robustly enforcing the law. And these were all businesses that didn't have a business license. They shouldn't have been operating in the state. Did I miss anything?
No,
I
I think that's
Yeah.
absolutely correct. I think the only thing I would add is that in the bill, we did include language specifically to address. So you'll see when we list out the parties that can be responsible, there's a section that says for parties that do not fall into any of the preceding categories, and that's specifically so that if there's a fully unlicensed business, we don't know an owner of record, we still have some process to deal with with that.
Okay. And would it, I guess, I don't know what they call it, your field enforcement people?
Yep.
Wouldn't they already have like some sort of discretion about who to cite? Like I would imagine if there is like a 18-year-old, there or some young individual that seems like they have no responsibility or part of it. I mean, like, wouldn't they be able to like sort of identify who's in charge and maybe choose to cite that individual instead?
So it's a good question. I mean, I think they try very hard to find the highest level employee that they can. But at the end of the day, if that person is never in the store because they operate behind, they do something different or they're just not showing up, we don't, we have to enforce the law. Like this is the statute on the books. And so at some point after trying to work with the business or finding somebody, if we can't sort of keep going back for months and months and months to one business trying to find the right manager. So at the end of the day, we're going to cite who is there. And they try very hard to work with the business, to get them into compliance, to make it work. But the statute on the book says they can cite anyone. So, I want my team to not be citing the kid who has the summer job. I'm not sure what the next comptroller will want, but we also have to enforce the law. Like I don't have discretion or it doesn't work.
Yeah, just one more question, Madam Chair. We got time, right? All sorts of time this afternoon.
We only have 20 witnesses today.
I've spoken with your office before about I've had this issue in my district with unlicensed hair salons. And it sounds relatively insignificant, somebody running this out of, but I think it kind of crept up, sort of around the time of COVID. But I've had some, operating salons that are following the rules, with insurance, with a business license, with everything like that, come to me because it's been really frustrating for them because they feel like they're doing everything that they're supposed to be doing and paying a lot of overhead because of it, and then there's lots of these other businesses that are like operating without doing the things that they should be doing. So I'm wondering, like, just from what I understand what you're saying, like if these that are unlicensed type businesses, would they be like cited under this? How would that be enforced? Or
it's the same law.
The same
we're
thing?
not changing the law. All we're doing, we're not changing who can be cited. We're not changing any of the substance of that. We're just changing who the actual person is who can receive the criminal citation.
Okay.
We're not touching the authority otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in that example, then, whoever could be cited, since they've been operating unlicensed and there's no designated licensed representative, if we were to pass it, it would just be the owner, whatever discretion you had before?
No.
Or?
So sorry if I'm not.
Yeah.
So right now we have the authority to go cite these businesses.
Yeah.
And we cite anybody, like theoretically we can cite anybody we find in that business. We can give a criminal citation to anybody we find in that business. This bill doesn't change that we still have to enforce the law. It just says we can't cite just any old Tom, Dick, or Harry, right? We have to cite the like licensed representative, the person, what do we call it?
Licensed representative.
The licensed representative, the person the business has told us should be cited.
But if there is no license that's ever existed for this business, then who do you cite?
So the bill has a specific provision. So it says, that we will cite the owner, the licensed representative. If there's a corporate structure, then that. If none of those apply, then it says that we would cite somebody who manages the affairs of the business. But that's just if the previous categories don't apply. And I will also just add that salon licenses fall under the Board of Cosmetologists. So we
Not
wouldn't
us.
be citing in
We
that
don't
case.
cite them.
Okay.
But if they have, if they're doing
I'll
retail
talk to
sales
them.
as well,
Get to the bottom of
That's not us. That's not us. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Comptroller.
Thank you. Yes.
Senator Lamb?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for bringing this bill to our attention. So just trying to understand some of the opposition here, because some of it is not making a great deal of sense to me. So I'm just kind of reading through the Howard County Chamber. It says, our members remain concerned with the appearance that this bill would grant new authority to the comptroller to issue and enforce citations for various business licenses. It doesn't seem like
There's no new authority. We are retracting our authority. It is a really confusing bill to read. I totally grant you that, but we are not trying to increase our authority. I don't want to. We don't have the resources to.
So, like,
we are
this
trying to
letter from the-
limit who can be cited.
So this letter from the chamber, it seems a little bit off base there. It's kind of directed in the wrong way. But, one of the other things they cite here, as well as what I think ABC, the Association for Associated Business and Contractors, are also citing, is this licensed business license representative component of this, and they seem to have some heartburn with regards to that. What's kind of your retort to that? That, I guess your point is that they should have someone who's designated that you can identify, ideally, to be able to cite and present this to, so it's not just the random person at the front door that might happen to be there and receiving this citation on them. They feel that this is an unnecessary burden just to have someone designated. I guess, what's your contention to that?
I mean, look, businesses,
there's some of these businesses have a resident agent or something like that.
So
Why not
businesses can name their resident agent as their licensed representative. There's nothing all businesses, when they become a business, already have to say that they have a resident agent, right? So businesses could just say our resident agent is the licensed representative. But because these are criminal citations, under current law, we can't just cite the resident agent. But there's nothing preventing a business from using the same individual as their resident agent and their licensed representative. So we're not looking for them to give us a whole bunch of names. They can just say on the license, resident agent, or see resident agent, or whatever it is. They don't have to. We're not trying to create more work. We just need to know who that person is that we should cite.
And just trying to be helpful in addressing these points that were brought up, is it possible that the bill could be amended just to say if they don't designate a licensed representative, that the resident agent becomes the licensed representative?
We could probably. I don't know. Can we do that?
I would have to check.
it seems
we'll
like
check. We're not opposed to that. I just need to check the legality of it. Yes.
Right. It sounds like maybe part of this
Right.
is just it's burdensome to have to redesignate
Right.
somebody else. So maybe if the default is if these businesses don't designate a licensed representative, maybe the default just becomes the resident agent.
Yeah, I think the only thing, I'm flipping through my brain really quick, the only thing I would worry about, and it might be fine, is if that actually changed sort of a different section of code, like the resident agent section of code, because if you sign up to be somebody's resident agent, and then all of a sudden you can be criminally cited for something because that business didn't designate a licensed representative, you might be unhappy. So it might just change it. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. So we are not opposed to that. It doesn't matter to me who the person is. Businesses can designate anybody they want. It's fine with me, but I just offer that as one potential. We'd have to look into it.
Yeah, just something to think through, because it seems that may
it's
be
fine.
one way to address kind of the burdensome complaint that is going
it's
on
fine.
here.
Yeah.
Do the citations need to be delivered in person, or can they be mailed to someone?
They do need to be, we have to follow criminal procedures, because they're criminal, which includes delivering citations in person. So that's another reason we're saying we're happy to limit it to brick and mortar stores, facilities in Maryland, which it didn't in the original bill, but we're happy to do that because we can't mail this citation. It has to be delivered in person because it's a criminal citation.
And this pertains to really to trades licenses, not to occupational licenses of any sort.
Yeah, this is traders. So under the code, there's numerous license types covered, but the only ones we enforce this way are traders licenses.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
You're making me remember some of the companies I was designated as a resident agent. I might want to remove my name from that list.
Yeah.
Senator Ella?
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Controller, for this bill, to make it clear. I just have a couple questions on the numbers. Do you have a number of how many licensees you have in Maryland?
Oh, a number of traders licenses?
Yes,
I don't off the top of my head.
all
I'm
the
sorry. I don't. Do you know?
We do not actually issue the traders licenses. They are issued by the clerks of the court.
Oh, that's right.
So we enforce them, but we don't issue them, so we don't have figures.
So do you have a database of who are
I believe that the clerks of the court do share that information with us, but again, they don't technically fall under us, so I don't have that information. I know our Field Enforcement Bureau has some figures on how often they're issuing citations, how they're following up.
So how do you get a report about who to go visit?
I believe we have a relationship with the clerks of the court. Yep. We're also, when we're looking at how we're going to be enforcing this, it's most commonly it's going to come up because, perhaps a business license was suspended for non-payment of taxes.
So it's a trader's license go through the clerk of court in each county?
Yep.
Okay, great. And so you've said you have, 1,200 citations?
Last year or the year before, we issued 1,200 citations.
Yeah. So could you get us data on how many licenses out there?
Sure, we can try, yeah.
The impact and...
Yep.
Yeah. And lastly, following up on Senator Giles' question as far as, so we issue legislation, the departments do regulations. Couldn't you just by regulation say, hey, you agents, don't you give citations to anyone who are not the owners? Just don't do it. Couldn't you do those by regulation?
Yeah, we don't think that we would have. Our lawyers don't think we have the authority to do that, which is why we brought the bill.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Senator Kramer?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello, Comptroller.
Hello.
Good to see you, ma'am.
You too.
All right, couple of questions. Definitely there is an inequity in current statute if it affords the Comptroller's office the opportunity to go in and issue a criminal citation to anyone with a presence in the business. So I do appreciate the idea of maybe trying to find a degree of association between the failure and the actual party responsible.
Right.
Is injunctive relief available now to the Comptroller's office? So in other words, you're indicating that sometimes you go back and go back and go back and you can't find anybody responsible for not having the trader's license. Can your office go into the courts and say, hey, we are looking to padlock the doors on this business because we simply can't get them licensed? Is that?
It's a good question. I guess theoretically we could do that. The amount of time and expense it would take to do that for us and for the courts would be not insignificant, I think. Especially since the statute would need to be changed again, though, because right now we can cite anybody. And so we do.
All right, but on that aspect of this, you go in and you cite whomever it is that's in the store. They're not responsible for getting that license.
Right.
How does that help you move the ball forward? They now have to, I'm guessing, hire a criminal defense attorney and go before a court and say, Your Honor, this is 18-year-olds working in this business, has no authority whatsoever to apply for and receive a trader's license. So, Your Honor, why are we here? And I have to believe that costs the Comptroller's office.
So I agree with you, which is why we don't want to do that.
But I'm trying to figure out how this gets us there. That's what I'm trying to get a handle on.
So I think we are open to ideas. The only way that we have been able to come up with, and I do think that the chamber and others who we've talked to understand this, the only way we've been able to come up with that won't drag people into court, but that actually holds the person responsible is to know who the responsible party is. And we can't list the resident agent because that is not allowed under the law that defines what a resident agent is.
And I can understand there might be a lot of resident agents, if they have to now bear this liability, they're going to say,
no way.
Nope, not going to happen.
Exactly. And so that's why we just need to come up with some person who is responsible for this. And, we are open-minded to your thoughts on that, if there's a better way to do this, but this was sort of the way. Just businesses already designate a resident agent. We thought they could just designate a licensed representative, and they could just say, you know, the same person.
And there might be partnerships,
Yeah.
and there is no resident agent. We're talking exclusively if it's a corporation, an LLC.
Yeah.
So you could maybe go and say it's the resident agent, which again would have a chilling effect on those who are willing to assume that position, but it may not encompass a particular business that is not incorporated. And I'm guessing there's a good chance that if a business is willing to go the distance and incorporate, then chances are they're going to have their trader's license. It sounds more like this is a likelihood where you have somebody who's simply doing something and they are not either sophisticated enough to have known to get a trader's license, and hopefully you all go in and say, this is required, or they're simply, doing their thing.
Yep.
And I'm just, all right, how does this work with out-of-state companies and?
Sure, good question. So we want to limit the bill so it only applies to brick and mortar places that have brick and mortar stores in the state, because those are ones that we actually visit and issue criminal citations to. If they're out of state, we can't send them a criminal citation. So we're really only concerned, and we will offer a sponsor amendment to do this, to make sure it's a brick and mortar location in the state.
And what about a Home Depot in the state? And
Yeah, I mean, I guess if Home Depot blew their trader's license, you know, you can bring their lobbyist in and bug them.
But what happens if you walk into Home Depot and you don't see it? You go up to the first cash register
Yeah,
and
your little license
issue
there.
a criminal citation to
No, I don't
to
want to
the
do that, and I
cashier?
don't want you guys to let us do that. I don't want the General Assembly in the state of Maryland to allow that to happen, so that's why we're here.
And I agree. There's already a definite inequity in the process. But I appreciate what you're trying to do, so.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Thank you for that, Comptroller.
Oh,
Good
sure.
to see you.
No,
Thank you,
thank you.
Madam Chair.
So, Mr. Vice Chair, are there any questions left?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I was going to say, Madam Comptroller, congratulations. I think you're the first person all session that has caused a question to be asked by every member of the Senate Finance. Just about every member of the Senate Finance. So that's truly impressive.
Always shooting high there.
But I will say the explanation was pretty thorough. I kind of understand. I liken it to like a liquor license where there's a designated individual that's responsible if there's a
problem.
violation. So
Yes.
I got it. Right?
Yes.
I think you answered my question about the resident agent. I think I understand that. So, but it sounds like your authority of enforcement rests in either you have a license that's valid or not. Are there other enforcement authority that the comptroller have in the case of a business license?
So I don't know all of them off the top of my head. For traders licenses, which is, this part of the code covers multiple types of licenses, but we really only issue citations in this way for traders licenses. I'm not sure. Do we do other things besides? I mean, if they don't pay their taxes, then we start withholding any money that would have come back to them through their taxes, right? If they haven't paid, we'll start, and we'll start pulling in that money without, if they were to get any sort of refunds or anything. But I don't know. I don't think there's other things.
But for the most part, is you either have a valid license or you don't, and this is why we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the statute specifically gives us authority, or these penalties are specifically for unlicensed business activity related to the business licenses outlined in the Title 17 of the Business Regulations article. So it's narrow. We're not in general responsible for overseeing these businesses.
Yep.
Got you. The other thing you mentioned brick and mortar. What about like those little carts, mobile things that have, are they considered bricks and mortar, or they come under, they get some other type of license?
No, I actually had that same question for our director of field enforcement, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. But he specifically said that they actually go through other processes to address. Those are typically handled through peddlers licenses, and the normal citation process really doesn't work for those types of businesses. So they have other ways of dealing with licensing issues in those cases.
Gotcha. And last question, I believe, and I thought Senator Washington was going here. Are there additional licenses beyond the trader's license that local governments issue for the same type of businesses? I'm thinking about, like, in Baltimore City, I think there's like a late night license or something that the Department of Finance kind of regulate or whatever. Are you familiar with any local jurisdictions offering an additional license that you would need to operate in those local jurisdictions?
On the list of licenses that we do regulate in 17-201, there are a few local licenses. I don't recall the one that you're specifically mentioning, but for instance, like a Calvert County magazine dealer is one of the licenses listed. It's probably not going to be super relevant as far as this bill is concerned, although, again, hopefully our amendments should make it clear that this is...
It's not what we're going after.
Yeah.
Just going after the trader's license.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All those questions, and I got more confused.
It's really simple. We want to have less authority.
But the trader's license is issued by our clerk of the court, and you go in and enforce whether they have one or not.
Yes.
So you must have a list somewhere of all the trader's licenses.
So the clerks do, and I'm sure that Van, our chief of Field Enforcement Bureau, who couldn't be here, I'm sure he would be able to answer that better, like how they have the list and how they know it, but we can get you that information.
Okay. I was just getting confused by which license it is you're regulating. Thank you. Well, I don't see any other questions. Senator Jackson, you sure you don't have a question?
Thank you, Senator Jackson.
Thank you. So that ends this panel, and we are going to bring up Grayson Wiggins and Hannah Allen, favorable with amendments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hannah's in another bill hearing, so I'm filling in. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Grayson Wiggins here on behalf of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. You have our written testimony, so I'll be quick. And I apologize, I didn't see all the hearing because I was over in the House. So I apologize if I'm repeating something, but I did just want to raise two quick issues that we have concerns with and questions. And I do want to thank the Comptroller's Office for meeting with us before the hearing to talk through these. But the first is on page 2, line 9, which I do believe you all talked about. That resident of the state requirement. So Title 17 it's not just a trader's license. There's like 15 to 17 licenses in there that are regulated. Some of those are inherently non-residential. And by that I mean, so 17-601D is a non-resident construction license. So it seems odd to us that you would have a resident agent for a non-resident construction company that has a specific non-resident license. The other issue I wanted to raise is on page 3, line 18, which is removing the language in the bill or in the current law that a person who is convicted of this would have actually had to have engaged in the unlicensed business. And so I appreciate the Comptroller's intent, but we have questions as to why that language is being removed if the intent is to only go after people who are engaged in unlicensed business practices. And I do want to say, we're happy to continue to have the conversation with the Comptroller's Office. We're willing to work with them to try and find a solution here. I think the intent is good. It's just a matter of the language being correct. And again, there are additional questions we have in our written testimony, so I would just reference that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Grayson. Do I have any questions for Grayson? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a structural question. So, Grayson, you're representing the Maryland Chamber of Commerce,
Yes, sir.
but we have testimony from the Howard County Chamber of Commerce. So they also act independently of the Maryland Chamber.
Yes, they're what we call a federated partner. So they are a member of ours, but they do have the ability to take their own positions on things.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thanks, ma'am.
Getting off easy. I don't see any other questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Grayson. And then Kelly Locklear is here, unfavorable.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee. For the record, Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Alliance. We are unfavorable, but I do need to just start by thanking the Comptroller's Office. We've had quite a few conversations. I've had a lot of back and forth with my members, and we're really trying to think through some of the problems that exist in current law and then the solution that we're trying to find here. And I just want to say on the record, too, we are not advocating for noncompliance at all. But, and maybe to Senator Kramer's point a little bit here, we're talking about a misdemeanor for not filing a $300 trader's license. And that seems pretty severe. So I think it would be appropriate for the committee to look at that and think about a civil penalty. And I did have a conversation with them. I know that they give them plenty of chances and opportunity to rectify that. So maybe in egregious cases where they are not going out and getting the license, by all means go after them. But perhaps the other solution is to shut that business down too. And I hate to say that on the record, but it's true. If you are not complying with the law, there are things that can be done here to step in and say, well, guess what? Then you don't have the right to operate in this state. The residency requirement is a problem for us, period. So section 17302 is what I'll point you to. That is impractical, I would say, not only for a national company, as our highest ranking individual may be a manager in a store, that's just not appropriate at all. But there are also folks, we're a border state, that are going to be operating across the borders, and they may not live here either. So we're gonna ask for that to be removed too. And I can go ahead and stop there. Senator Hayes, you brought up other types of licenses. I brought this up yesterday. We keep talking strictly about traders' licenses, but I would point you to the fiscal note that under current law, this bill does apply to 15 different categories of miscellaneous licenses: construction, junk dealer, restaurant, et cetera. So I'll stop there. Just some things I wanted to bring up to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. So you're going to continue to work with the Comptroller's Office.
Absolutely.
We appreciate that. Senator Hayes?
I will ask a question. Kaylee, it sounds like the testimony that you provided here today is in dispute of what is current law.
A little bit of that,
The
but
fact
also...
that, right, because what the comptroller testified to and what the bill does, it doesn't identify the violation as a misdemeanor. That's already law, right?
Sure.
I think they're just trying to find the individual responsible.
Right. Understood. And so the conversations that I had with my legislative committee centered around what Senator Guile and Senator Lamb brought up, like, why is the registered agent not good enough? And so I'd love to expand upon that a little bit. A registered agent can be located out of state, it can be a company, or it can be an individual. But that person under Maryland law has to be available during normal business hours to receive correspondence, period. And they are going to receive all sorts of other legal correspondence, by the way, so say through the court system. And typically what they do is they have a P.O. box in the state that is checked on a regular basis, and that's how that works. So I think our thought process was kind of, well, why can't we just do this by certified mail like you would from the court system? Like, it's a little confusing to us and off-putting that we would have to identify somebody who really doesn't have anything to do with the operations of, say, a corporation making those decisions. So that's our other problem, too.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so, Kaylee, I think what you're acknowledging and what I was concerned with to some degree is I was certainly unaware about this inequity in the way the process works right now, and the notion that there can be criminal charges for someone who has absolutely nothing to do with the business entity acting in violation of state law right now. So, pardon me, I think maybe there should be a little more conversation about the idea of a civil fine that might be appropriate to reflect the effort the comptroller's putting in. In other words, somebody's operating unknown to them that they are to have this trader's license. they're gone, there's a warning, get your license, we'll be back to visit you in 2 weeks. Come back in 2 weeks, they don't have it, there's a civil fine. Come back 2 weeks later, there's not. The fine might increase yet again, or there might be injunctive relief to shut the business down.
Right.
So that they're no longer conducting business. But it does sound like there's a little bit of, question as to what's current law, but I do appreciate the comptroller's effort to at least winnow that down in an effort to try to find the party responsible. But I just suspect, for the most part, if an individual is knowingly operating their business without getting the trader's license, then they're not likely to be submitting to anybody here's the person to contact in the event you catch us not operating with a trader's license.
Right.
So I guess that's a little bit of a challenge, but thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I see no other questions. Thank you very much, Kaylee, for your
Thank you.
testimony. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 664, and we're going to have the comptroller back to the table for Senate Bill 665. And you can pronounce the name of your panel member, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Comptroller.
Great. Hi. Hello again, Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Hayes, members of the Finance Committee. This is on an even more exciting topic in my agency, unclaimed property. So I'm delighted to have the director of our unclaimed property division here with me. So just to make sure everybody knows what unclaimed property is, it's any financial asset not claimed by its rightful owner for a set period. The type of property can include bank accounts, stocks, bonds, life insurance proceeds, what have you. The property is considered unclaimed after the dormancy period, which is usually 3 years. It's turned over to the state. Then we list it on our website, which is accessible to the public. People can search for it, claim it. We also send out postcards quarterly to everybody who has unclaimed property. We are trying to give it out to people. Common types of unclaimed property include bank accounts, stocks, uncashed checks, estates. One time I had $7 from CVS that it had been like a refund from CVS that never made its way to me. And so CVS had eventually turned it over to the state. So we work hard to notify people of their unclaimed property. Like I said, we send quarterly postcards, maintain a website, and publish an annual list of unclaimed property. But we can only do so much under current law, and it's really time for us to modernize and make sure that we are keeping up with all of our fellow states. So on a high level, SB 665 makes government operations more efficient by refining reporting requirements, streamlining claims procedures, and leveraging modern data tools. So you have heard me talk a lot about wanting to modernize the Office of the Comptroller. This bill is about doing that, and it's about we are going to modernize the IT behind our unclaimed property system. We're moving into a brand new system this year, but we actually can't take advantage of all of the features of that new system unless we also modernize state law. We have talked with my fellow unclaimed property administrators across the country. There's a whole association of us, the National Association of Unclaimed Property Administrators, and there's best practices out there. We are behind the curve right now on making sure that we collect what should be remitted to Marylanders and on getting it out. So the bill has a few key provisions I'll touch on, including adding virtual currencies like cryptocurrency to the list of potential unclaimed property assets. As digital assets become more common, it's essential that our regulatory framework really adapts accordingly. We also want to ensure that we can proactively and send out claims for less than $5,000 to reduce the bureaucratic burden on Marylanders and on our agency. We also want to clarify procedures for establishing the death of an insured individual. This change actually helps streamline the disbursement of life insurance policies and annuities so that beneficiaries can receive those funds without delays. And as many of you know, the Unclaimed Property Fund is a special fund. This money is held in a special fund. And in this bill, we also allow our agency to use up to $5 million annually from that special fund to pay for ongoing IT costs of our unclaimed property system, cybersecurity needs for the agency, and IT customer relations systems. So we believe that this bill will bring more money into the state by modernizing and by bringing in cryptocurrency, and also will strengthen consumer protections, modernize state regulations, and improve government efficiency. So I urge a favorable report on SB 665. Thank you. And I think Hesh is here for any questions, so to make sure I don't get anything wrong. So we don't have anything else, but just
See any questions, Comptroller? Oh, there we
Come
go.
on, guys. Come
I
on.
want you to feel needed, Madam
Yeah,
Controller.
yes.
And you are, definitely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So interesting area of, as a CPA, I've done work in past years in unclaimed property.
Yeah.
And it's a big area. I mean, stuff that goes into it, bank accounts that people pass away, their children or peers don't know about, and it just sits out there all kind of ways. You know, it's a lot of money, right?
It is.
Yeah, a lot of money, a lot of assets. And so every year, I think there's an audit for these unclaimed properties, right?
Yes.
Okay. How does the state handle those audits as far as administratively?
Sure, it's a great question. And I think you mean, how do we procure an outside auditor to review our books?
Just an open question, so thank you for being narrowing the question down.
Sure.
Yeah.
So as you said, we have a contract, or as you intuited, we have a contract with an outside auditor to review our books, both for unclaimed property and for our ACFR every year. Yesterday, we actually approved a contract for a new auditor to audit our books for our ACFR, and I'm excited. It's a small business reserve, 35% MBE, so a great new contract. For our unclaimed property, it's every, how many years do we get
3
it?
years.
Every 3 years.
I apologize. Every 3 years for the OLA, annually for the external.
Okay, sorry, annually for
Yeah.
an external auditor, but how long is the contract? We don't do an RFP. Do we do an RFP every year?
Not that I'm aware of.
How often do we do the RFP?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you off the top
Okay.
of my head. I'm sorry.
I'll find out how often we do the RFP for a new auditor. But one of the things that we have instituted is we are doing a top to bottom review of how we craft our RFPs to make sure that we allow for new auditors to learn how to deal with unclaimed property, because it's such a specialized field and there are fewer and fewer auditors out there. So we want to make sure that we have a large pool of auditors who can break into the field. And so I am happy to say that we are reviewing how we create that RFP for the next time that it goes out.
Yeah. But you're not sure how often?
I
that,
don't know off the top of my head how often we
Is it
send
like
out
the-
the RFP.
Yeah.
I do apologize. It is 5 years.
It's 5
It
years.
is 5 years,
Okay.
yes.
5 years.
yeah.
So it's
the
not
next-
like the airport concessions where it's 25.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. So the next time this goes out, we will have a brand new way of doing it, and we will make sure that new auditors are able to learn on how to get involved in the unclaimed property system.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Control. So I appreciate you going there and seeing how these things functions and understand it to make it work for Marylanders. So you mentioned one part of auditable accounts that have a MBE. Which part was that?
So we hire outside auditors for a few different things. One is for the unclaimed auditor, for unclaimed property. Another is for our ACFR, our annual combined financial report that we put out every year.
So that's the one that have an MBE.
So we just approved it yesterday at the Board of Public Works. It's a small business based in Owings Mills is going to do it next year, and it has I want to say 35% MBE requirements on it.
Okay, that have MBE. But the unclaimed property, which is a big area. Does that have a MBE?
I do not remember off the top of my head what the MBE requirement was on the unclaimed property audit RFP. Do you remember?
I do not.
Sorry, but I can get it for you. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
for unclaimed
Yeah.
property. Okay. Yeah, well, if you could, I'm curious with that.
we're happy to follow up.
Because I get feedback from constituents about issues in that area.
Yep.
So I'm not sure exactly where the rules are, and if you could reach back to me.
Yep, I appreciate that. And like I said, we're taking a hard look at how we do RFPs to ensure that they have, they have the MBE requirements. One of the issue is if there's a single source of work so that none of it can be subcontracted, we can't add an MBE goal because MBEs are only, the official program that we run is just for subcontracted work. So if it's just one piece of work and nothing can be subcontracted, then there's no there might not be an MBE goal, not because we don't want MBEs to participate, but because none of it is subcontractable.
So
and
is that-
actually, it could even be that an MBE is the prime, but it still wouldn't count towards the MBE because the program we run is just subcontracting.
So why is it not subject to subcontract? Is it laws or regulations or practice?
So
or
how the MBE law is written is that it is a subcontracting program. It is not a prime program.
Okay.
But if we have a source of work that needs to be done and it's really just one thing and the company's going to do that thing that we're hiring them for and they don't need to there's no piece of it that they could subcontract out, then there wouldn't be an MBE goal because there would be no subcontractable work.
Yeah.
It's all theoretical.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
have issues
know.
with that, why it wouldn't be subcontractable, because even federal government with audits of all agencies, they have a subcontracting requirement or had.
So
And
not every contract has pieces that are subcontractable. If I'm just buying widgets from you, you might not I might not need you to subcontract out the widgets, or it might be that it's so specialized that you create the widgets and you subcontract out how to package them. I don't know. This is all very theoretical.
And neither do I, so that's why I asked the question. Well, thank you for your answer. If you could reach
Sure.
out to me with that,
Yep.
those questions.
Happy to get back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Controller.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I don't see any other questions for Senate Bill 665, so that ends the hearing on 665.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Comptroller.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Senator Ellis, you're next. Senate Bill 496, Department of Commerce, Complaint Portal and Annual Report. And you'll have Grayson Wiggins and Stefan Popscu as your panel.
Thank you, Chair Bottle and Vice Chair Hayes and members of the Finance Committee. Senator Arthur Ellis, Charles County District 28, here to present Senate Bill 496, which is a bill that will create a complaint portal and annual reporting requirement in the Maryland Department of Commerce. This bill would improve accountability, transparency, efficiency, innovation, and equitable access to the licensing, permitting, and registration of businesses and individuals in Maryland. To achieve these goals, the bill would require the Department of Commerce to create and maintain a complaint portal that allows constituents to report when a governmental unit takes longer than 60 days to process an application or registration for a business or nonprofit organization. We just heard from the controller about the trader's license and that process that's spread out throughout the state in each counties and the problems there. This bill would look into that process, and believe me, there was absolutely no coordination with us and the previous bill sponsors. This bill would also require the Department of Commerce to submit an annual report to certain committees of the General Assembly to share anonymized data about the complaints submitted. Small businesses, entrepreneurs, and nonprofits are integral to Maryland's community and economy by creating a complaint portal and annual report requirement that allows any resident to submit complaints about delays in licensing and registration. We can reduce unnecessary administrative delays and look for new ways to improve our systems in Maryland through applicants' feedback. Small businesses and startup companies, this support may be critical. For small business and startup companies, this support may be critical to their success and integration into the Maryland communities and economy. It's interesting to know when we look at certain data, some information we can be proud of, some we cannot. One thing that we cannot be proud of when we look at business rankings of the states, Maryland comes in at the close to the bottom. There is a U.S. News and World Report survey of the states. It put Maryland at 35. That's in the bottom half for business responsiveness. Accounting Today lists Maryland as the bottom among the 10 worst in the states when it comes to our business processes. We in Maryland do not have a good reputation for supporting our businesses, getting them licenses, getting them the permits in a timely manner. I get calls from individuals I know all over the state saying, hey, can you help us? Can you reach out to some elected official you know to move our permits on this multi-million-dollar project? It's a problem that's all over the state of Maryland. And how can we hold ourselves as government responsible, knowing the problem? How can we have daylight when it comes to this issue? Sunlight shining on these issues. This bill will be that sunlight. And something very amazing when I looked in the fiscal summary happened, something very amazing. The Commerce Department tells us that this bill's requirement, they can handle it with existing resources. They need no additional monies to enforce this bill and to create that portal. Also, this bill does not affect local government operations or finances. We will impose no mandates on local governments, and we won't impose any mandates on businesses. What we want to do is make sure, though, that we know when businesses are having trouble receiving their permits in Maryland. And part of the reason why we rank so low in Maryland is a complacency among our dispersed permit issuing agencies. As you just heard from the controller, for a trader's license, you want to open a business, you have to go to the local courthouse and go through their process. And they don't even have the data on what's going on. I mean, if we don't know what's going on, we just can't fix it. I mean, do we want to help our businesses succeed in Maryland? Do we want to create more jobs in Maryland? And if you think about it, with so many of our federal workers losing their jobs now, we want to make sure businesses in Maryland are able to hire these people. If we have businesses want to come to Maryland and they're waiting 6 months, a year for a permit, they can't hire people. I know in the past we were very much complacent. We were like, well, we have an unemployment rate of 2.5%, the lowest in the nation, so we don't have to worry about these things. Well, that is changing tremendously. I know a lot of my constituents are calling me with issues, asking me for referrals and opportunities. And so we need to look at this seriously and basically keep all our permit issuing and license issuing organizations responsible to let us know basically what they're doing, what we need to do as General Assembly, because this bill also calls for a report from the Commerce Department on the data that they collect. And again, I remind you, colleagues, this is a zero fiscal impact, but will really help businesses in Maryland do better. And you will hear from individuals representing businesses in Maryland. Therefore, colleagues, I presented the Senate Bill 496 and asked for a favorable vote report on Senate Bill 496. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Stefan, you want to go next?
Sure. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Stefan Popescu. I'm the owner of Reveal Real Estate, Inner Harbor Sonesta, Guilford Hall, and several other businesses in Baltimore City. My businesses have always complied with local laws. Part of the local laws is compliance and obtaining permits and licenses. And unfortunately, during my tenure, A lot of these licenses and permits have taken more than 60 days to obtain. Current example is we are currently constructing 50 affordable units downtown in Baltimore. And even though our team has followed up many times, as well as providing all the information necessary to receive such permits, we had to alert our finance partners that we were not going to make our conservative timeline. In addition to construction permits, we've also had delays in projects in the past for liquor, health, and use and occupancies. We want to continue investing in Maryland, creating more jobs. The permitting and licensing delays have made it very difficult for us to plan accordingly and produce new projects, as the extended timelines that we need to put into these projects to prepare have priced us out of projects that would be possible. In conclusion, I would ask for a favorable report for Bill 496 so the state can be aware of the problems that currently exist for builders, investors, and businesses throughout the state. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Grayson Wiggin before we go for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, Grayson Wiggins here on behalf of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce in full support of this bill. One of the primary issues that I hear from our members about is delays in permitting and licensing and the impediment that is to development and business creation in the state. And given some of the metrics that Senator Ellis noted, we think this is an important bill so that we can highlight the issue and see where the problems are. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have a question. All the permits that Stefan mentioned were county permits, construction, liquor, use, and occupancy. So this portal would include all the county delays also, not just state permit delays?
All government agencies, known and unknown, because we just found about the trader's license, that went through the circuit court, the courts, clerk of court. I didn't know that was a source for permits also. So, yes, all agencies, county, state, municipalities in Maryland, people will be able to call in, and this portal will be able to document the issues from each area, each agency in the state that might issue permits.
So, Senator, what do you see happening when a report goes into the portal for a county permit? Because that's the issue in my county, is it's all about building permits, as Grayson probably knows. So once this gets reported to the portal, then what will happen to get it to the county for a response? What's that process?
Well, in this bill, there's no process. It's just an information gathering. Okay. And the bill calls for reports to come to the General Assembly. Okay. So we can see what the issues are throughout the state of Maryland and its impact.
So we would see, for instance, if our county was repeatedly in this portal for late permits, then it would be our responsibility to follow up.
Yes, ma'am. Whether legislatively, regulation-wise, or just downright pride. We just don't want to be the last ranked county, so let's fix the problem. Sometimes pride can really help fix the issues if we know. Senator. Yes.
Senator Mao.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for bringing this legislation. Excuse me. So we represent District 37. We've got Caroline, Dorchester, Talbot, and Wacomico counties. And I don't think the national ranking does an adequate job of describing the challenges that businesses face and the challenges that drive businesses away from our counties. It's pretty interesting. In Wacomico County, you can drive on Route 13, and all of a sudden, when you cross the Delaware line, it looks like business explosion. It is tremendous. The housing crisis ends at the Delaware line in Wacomico County. And for that matter, Caroline County. So we've got Caroline County, Wacomico County in our district. They share a border. And so I'm very interested in what you were saying, talking about this would include issues with county permitting and problems at county permitting. And would it also include municipal?
Yes. Okay. Yes, Senator.
Is there anything see, one other issue is just the sheer cost, right? So why would you start a business in Maryland when you know it's going to cost, tens of thousands of dollars just to get the permits to get going versus right in the other town over in Delaware where there's minimal cost. And I guess there's nothing in that reporting that would include the costs associated with getting the permits?
Well, as a previous business owner, we decide where we want to invest. We take into consideration the cost and the return on that investment. And so that's baked into the business decision. What's not baked into that business decision is waiting 6 months, a year, 2-3 years for a permit. That's the thing right there. Investors, business folks, they will crunch the numbers and they'll see with all the fees they have to pay, with all the costs, is it worth it? And Maryland is a very affluent state, and so housing is more costly here, and so many things are more costly here because it costs more to invest in Maryland. Land is more expensive here than, say, in spread out Texas. So they make those decisions, and they decide to invest those monies into their businesses because they can get that rate of return.
So what type of information would they make, would be submitted, and who would submit the information?
And so the bill says, that's a good question, Senator Mouse. So the bill says if a permit or a license take more than 60 days to be given, then that opens up, they're qualified to submit that information in the portal, which information will be gathered from around the state and a report made. And so basically this bill won't be going after anyone with fines or summons or complaints, criminal or civil or anything like that. It's basically information gathering portal.
So would you if you took more than 60 days to get your permit, then you could submit your information to the portal. And the applicant for the permit would be required to submit the information. Why not require the government agency, if it takes them longer, 60 days, and they should be required by law to report themselves to the portal?
And then we will come back with that fiscal note from MACO saying it's going to cost so much money. It's an unfunded mandate. We're going to have to hire 50 more people to monitor this because the problem is so bad. And so we took that out of the equation. We say, hey, it's self-reported from these individuals who apply for licenses, who apply for permits.
Well, I like the concept. However, I would flip it around, and the obligation should be on the and from my perspective, why would you put a burden on the petitioner? I think the government ought to be accountable at least to itself. It's the one that controls all the information. Plus, the people that are doing the work, they're getting paid. So whether that permit gets issued or not, and that job gets done, the people that are sitting on the permit, they get paid. They get a retirement. Everybody else is trying to get the permit to try to build the job, to grow the economy. They're the ones with all the skin in the game. And I don't think it would cost that much more, considering all the paperwork that they have to fill out a form and share that with the government. I would suggest that for you to consider.
Okay, I'll consider it, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for this bill. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 496, and now we'll go to Senate Bill 302, Maryland Small Business Innovation Research and Technology Transfer Incentive Program. Senator Lamb. Now, there's another person here. Is this somebody on your panel?
Yeah.
Stephen Allville?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, Chair Beidle, members of the Senate Finance Committee, here to introduce and request your support for Senate Bill 302. For the record, Clarence Lamb, Senator District 12. This is a very straightforward bill to really help support TEDCO, who many of you know does great work in the state. This bill is seeking to give TEDCO more flexibility in how they award grants under the Maryland Small Business Innovation Research and Technology Transfer Incentive Program. mouthful. Under the current statute, TEDCO is limited to awarding grants based on a percentage of Phase 1 or Phase 2 federal grants that a business receives. However, TEDCO reports that most applicants they receive are already receiving federal Phase 1 awards larger than $100,000, or they're receiving Phase 2 awards larger than $300,000. Ultimately, what this means is that TEDCO must give the awardees the maximum grant that's possible. They don't have any flexibility to be able to scale those grants out because the federal government is already giving the maximum, or giving very large awards to these awardees, and so they don't have the flexibility to be able to do that. Passing this bill will allow TEDCO greater flexibility in their awards so they're able to move the maximum amount up or down and scale that based on the available funds that they have in any given year. This bill won't increase the overall cost of the program. It would simply give TEDCO the needed flexibility with the funds that they already receive. Additionally, the bill would allow TEDCO to be more competitive with other similar programs in other states. And with that, that is the bill. Happy to turn over to Mr. Abul for his testimony and answer any questions at the end.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Stephen Allville. I'm the Chief Federal Engagement Officer for TEDCO, and I oversee TEDCO's SBIR support programs. I'd first like to start by thanking Senator Lamb for his leadership on this position, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 302. The SBIR program, as you may know, is a federal program that provides research funding to small businesses developing technology-based products. The funding is provided in two phases, Phase 1 and Phase 2, and is critical to early-stage companies which rely on this non-dilutive funding for their stability and growth. Maryland's SBIR incentive matching program was enacted in 2021, but did not receive funding until this fiscal year. As Senator Lamb mentioned, TEDCO administers this program. The statute includes rigid gaps on the amounts of awards and the number of awards that TEDCO can grant. Senate Bill 302 would eliminate these caps, but as Senator Lamb mentioned, would not change the overall amount of funding for this board, for this program, which continues to be a discretionary budget item. Removing the cap on the amount of the awards would give TEDCO the flexibility to change the award amounts for each phase over time to adapt to competing states, inflation, and the availability of funding. Removing the cap on the number of awards would provide flexibility if there's, again, increasing of funding over time or significant demand. For example, if we can only give 10 awards for Phase 2, but if we get much more demand for Phase 2 versus Phase 1, it would give us the flexibility to do that. The bill also adds a cap on the number of awards per company, which we believe is appropriate to avoid companies that submit multiple SBIRs in 1 year. In summary, Senate Bill 302 would give the SBIR STTR initiative program the flexibility to evolve over time to better meet the needs of small businesses in Maryland. For this reason, we ask for your favorable support. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for this panel? I'm not sure if I really understand the problem or the solution, but I'll follow up at another time, Senator Lamb. I don't want to take much time here. But I guess, could the representative from the agency give us an idea of why you believe the caps were put in place in the first place?
Yeah, I think what happened, when the original bill was put in place, we did a fiscal note for it, and the fiscal note proposed that we could do 10 Phase 2 matches and 20 Phase 1 matches based on the amount of funding that was available. And I think that somehow that got worked into the bill, but I don't think the intent, I think, is for us to be able to meet the demands of the small businesses in the state. If we're able to get more funding, if more funding is allocated to this program, we could not deploy that funding because of the caps in the amount of the awards and also the number of awards that we can issue. So over time, if we get more money for this bill, more money for this program, this bill would allow us to deploy that money effectively.
Got you. Thank you. And thank you for your response. Are there any questions for this panel? Seeing none, that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 302. Next, we will call Senate Bill 578. Again, Senator Lamb signed up to testify virtually. We have Sabin Wickert, who signed up favorable. First, of course, we'll hear from Senator Lamb, and then we'll go to the first virtual witness.
All right, good afternoon, members of the Senate Finance Committee, Vice Chair Hayes. For the record, Clarence Lamb, Senator in District 12, here to present and introduce Senate Bill 578. This bill alters the Maryland Home Improvement Commission's Guarantee Fund statute that allows the Maryland Home Improvement Commission, or MHIC, more flexibility in awarding eligible claimants and giving them the ability to award attorney's fees from the fund and also to do so at their discretion. The Guarantee Fund allows people whose homes have sustained damage due to poor contract work to be more easily reimbursed for costs that are spent on the project. The fund is funded by contractor licensing fees as well as reimbursements by contractors against whom MHIC has found that homeowners are permitted to recover. Depending on their contract, a homeowner may undergo arbitration or an administrative pathway to determine their eligibility for disbursement from the fund. The problem that this bill seeks to address is that some homeowners' arbitration orders do not sufficiently identify actual losses, so to speak, under the Guarantee Fund statute that MHIC will accept for reimbursement. So homeowners, in this instance, who have gone through arbitration and potentially appeals are still unable to access the fund and are potentially back where they started with the issue that they had. By removing the word expressly from the statute, our goal is to broaden the discretion and enable them to accept more arbitration awards. The second problem this bill addresses is one of attorney's fees that homeowners may incur. While many are able to go through proceedings without an attorney, some homeowners are facing arbitration and appeals of arbitration orders often must hire attorneys to handle their cases. By permitting MHIC to also award attorney's fees from this fund, this bill reflects the reality that for some consumers, accessing the fund is a really cumbersome legal process that may involve multiple levels of appeals and greater expenses than anticipated, particularly if attorneys are involved. Also want to call attention to the bill's fiscal impact, which is minimal and can be implemented with existing resources. MHIC, the Maryland Home Improvement Commission, estimates that the expenditures may cause license fees to increase by $5 for new licensees and perhaps up to $9 for renewals if payouts increase 5% to maintain the fund at its statutory levels. While we don't want to penalize good actors for the actions of bad actors, this is a nominal potential increase that could ensure that the fund can make more homeowners whole for bad contractor work. And again, just to emphasize, this is a potential increase. This is, anticipated that it could increase the payouts by 5%. It's really unclear how much might actually be required to help sustain the fund. So my office has also submitted amendments that will clarify the $30,000 cap applies to both actual losses and attorney's fees combined, and the circumstances under which MHIC can accept an award. So with that, that's the bill. Happy to turn over to the other members of the virtual panel and take questions in the end.
Thank you, Senator, for your testimony. First, we'll hear from Sabin Wickert. You're still on mute, Ms. Wickert.
Can you hear me now?
Excellent.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sabin Swickard, and I've been dealing with an MHIC and arbitration issue for the better part of 6 years now. We won a binding arbitration award, and through the appeals process of the contractor, it went all the way up through the Court of Special Appeals, who then clarified everything to make sure that the appeals weren't meritless anymore because all the other courts had considered them meritless. The opinion of the Court of Special Appeals wrote that the original arbitration judgment was sufficient for disbursement from the MHIC Guarantee Fund, and that The original award in the case would have sufficed. They even cited the case of Brodsky versus MHIC, which dates all the way back to 1989, which tells you just how long this problem's been going on. After we secured a final judgment in our favor, going all the way through the court systems and lasting years, MHIC is now strictly interpreting the statute language any way they please. And as a result, they're ignoring the binding arbitration decisions and the court judgments, which is not what legislature intended them to do when they created the MHIC division to begin with. They're also ignoring court decisions, hence my case and the one cited from 1989. And it's creating a lot of problems. And now they want us to go back through the MHIC process and the Office of Administrating Hearings to start this process all over again, because according to MHIC, they can't find, they are unable to order direct payment from the guarantee fund because there's no finding that the homeowners are entitled to recover under it, which is in direct opposition to what this Court of Special Appeals wrote. And it's not fair to us as the homeowners who have to burden the financial responsibility of legal fees to fight it.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we're going to hear from virtual testimony from Ms. Burton.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and Senator Lamb. Thank you for hearing from both of us today. My name is Megan Burton. I am Ms. Swickard's attorney, and I also have another client who is similarly situated with respect to how MHIC is treating, or rather ignoring, not only binding court judgments, but also arbitration decisions. And again, the long and short of it is that what happens is these homeowners are forced to, after litigating through an arbitration and, like Mrs. Swickard, going through 3 levels of appeals, all of which were determined in the homeowner's favor, she now has to start the process all over again before the Office of Administrative Hearings. I have another client who is similarly situated in that they had an arbitration decision, again, who awarded a modest amount to the homeowner, and the fund will not honor that arbitration decision, schedule that matter for a hearing before the Office of Administrative Hearings, and we're still waiting for a decision in that case. That case has gone on now 2 years. It's taken the homeowners to try to get a fund payment. And in that case, there wasn't even a court appeal process. Ms. Swickard, as she indicated, has essentially litigated almost 6 years over a matter of $10,000 for a very poor bathroom renovation. So we are testifying favorably to the bill. We think by taking out the language of expressly that the MHIC will have, at least will feel more comfortable, honoring these arbitration awards, which we think they should be doing anyway under the operative case law. As Ms. Swickard mentioned, the Brzezowski case, I think it was actually 1997 case, but that's 114 Maryland App 615. And the court there said, as long as the judgment awards a homeowner actual losses, that fund claim can pay. The fund can't claim, the MHIC can grant that fund claim. But unfortunately, MHIC doesn't see it that way, and it's really to the detriment of the homeowners, which is the whole purpose of the MHIC fund to begin with. So again, I thank you for your time, and I hope that the legislature acts favorably on this bill. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, this ends the hearing on Senate Bill 578.
The last bill of the day is Senate Bill 377, Economic Development Business Resource Initiative for Developmental Growth and Empowerment Bridge Program Establishment. There was a prior intro, so this is a sponsor only. Senator Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Alonzo Washington here to present on this great bill. I don't know who had this bill last year, but it's a better sponsor this year. I'll just say that. The Bridge program represents a significant opportunity to expand on proven success of business incubators in Maryland. While many existing incubators have focused primarily on technology sectors, this new initiative aims to apply the incubator model more broadly across diverse industries. The SAGE Policy Group study shows that Maryland's incubators, primarily in tech sectors, have generated substantial economic impact. For example, they support approximately 4,100 jobs annually and contribute $27.5 million in additional state taxes. The Bridge program seeks to replicate this success across a wider range of industries, including traditional sectors like restaurants, retail, and agriculture, as well as emerging fields like podcasting and e-commerce. While Maryland ranks highly in R&D spending and has strong technology and science base, it has struggled to translate this into broad-based commercial success. The Bridge program aims to address this by supporting entrepreneurs across all sectors. By expanding the incubator model beyond tech, the program can foster entrepreneurship and job creation in both urban and rural areas, supporting a more diverse range of Maryland's communities and economies. The bill builds on Maryland's existing network of 30 incubators, applying their proven methodologies and support systems to benefit entrepreneurs in non-tech industries. If the success of tech incubators can be replicated in other sectors, the economic impact could be substantial, potentially exceeding $1 billion annually when considering all supported businesses. By broadening the focus beyond tech, the Bridge program aims to unlock entrepreneurial potential across all Maryland's industries, driving inclusive economic growth and addressing the state's commercialization challenges. For these reasons, Madam Chair and Mr. Chairman, I ask for a favorable report on this bill, and I do want to recognize Colby Smith and all the advocates for this bill and all the hard work that they put in over the last 2 years trying to get this bill through.
I have a question, Senator.
Sure.
Did you see the testimony from UMBC today?
No, I have not.
They're asking for an amendment. You know, they have a tech group there on campus. So they're asking for an amendment that would allow incubators associated with our state's MSIs, as well as those associated with historical black colleges and universities, to be eligible for funding regardless of the establishment date. So if you'll look at that for me and let me know if you want to.
Definitely, I'll take a look at that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions on this bill? Thank you very much, Senator. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 377.